Well, has anybody woken up yet? Because it was a rather underwhelming Sunday when it came to the hype of the Championship playoff semi-final first legs. Two 0-0 draws between Norwich and Leeds, and West Brom versus Southampton leave it all to play for in a second leg as four teams chase a place at Wembley and a chance to play in the richest game in football to make the Premier League. We're going to look ahead to both of these second legs today, which take place on Thursday night and Friday night respectively. And we're going to preview both fixtures, give our score predictions for the game, and of course determine who we think will be playing in the Wembley final in just under a couple of weeks' time. As always, I'll encourage you to get involved in the comments and give me your score predictions for the second leg. If you beat or match my score, as always, you'll get a shout out in the next recap, which will be before the final in just over a week's time. Between now and then, though, a couple of very quick plugs. We will be live on Twitch watching both playoff semi-final second legs on Thursday and Friday, whilst playing a bit of FM over on my Football Manager channel. Link to that in the eye above. And later this week, keep your eyes peeled, because on Wednesday and Thursday, we will have our preview for both the League One and League Two playoff finals at Wembley. So make sure you come and get involved with those as well. Massive games in the EFL. But before we go and look ahead to the two second legs on Thursday and Friday, we need to have a quick look back at the first legs and see how we all got on in the comments with our predictions. For me, I and ahed between a 2-2 and a 2-1 in the Norwich-Leeds game. I went for Norwich to nick it at home. Thought they would be more aggressive because they had to win the home one based on their away form. Didn't happen. It cost me a point. And in the other game, I went for the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. But actually, it was the new Championship's favourite scoreline, something we've seen a lot in recent weeks. The developing trend for a 0-0, which got me 1 point rather than 3. Now, only one person in the entire comment section predicted a 0-0 draw in either game. That person has obviously won the match day. We'll get to you in a minute. They also were the only person to predict 2 draws in the first leg. So they've picked up 4 points. A number of us are left licking our wounds on 1. And unfortunately, if you were bold enough to pick a winner in both games, you have missed out entirely in this prediction one. For those of you level with me on 1 point, predicting one of the 2 outcomes as a draw were Chris, Mello, Ojo, Donald, Jason, Teo and Calvin. Well done to all of you. But at the top of the tree, my namesake Daniel, what an effort from you. A 0-0 draw predicted between Norwich and Leeds, the game I was certain would be the more entertaining. And in a 1-1 draw you predicted between West Brom and Southampton. 2 correct outcomes, 1 correct score, 4 points and the outright matchday winner for the first leg of the playoff semi-finals. With that out the way though, we move on to the second legs, where surely there will be more goals. Someone will have to be aggressive at some point, and actually I think we're going to see 2 very different games. Before we go and look at them individually, I do just want to give a quick shout out, well done to both Daniel Farker and Russell Martin, because particularly Russell Martin, and particularly in recent weeks Leeds United, have had criticism on this channel and in many places for their style of play and how much it can keep them open away from home and how much it can cost them games quite heavily at times. Now, both managers were far more pragmatic, and I think we saw, particularly in Daniel Farker's case, a lot of experience in EFL playoff and promotion pushes, and of course also against his former club Norwich, against a fellow German manager, that bit of respect. And for Russell Martin, we saw that change in shape that worked against Leeds, which they stuck with against West Brom, which enabled them to be far more solid defensively, whilst also creating a couple of openings. But if we go back to what we said in summary of both games of the first leg, we said that the home sides had to take advantages, particularly in Norwich's case, because their away records are so poor respectively. So when we look ahead to these ones, could you argue that 3rd and 4th have done their job? Not what happened in the League 2 playoffs, not what happened in one of the League 1 playoffs, where Peterborough tried a very similar approach to Leeds and Southampton the other night. They got pipped by a 0-0 and it ended up being the costly one. Will that be the difference in these two? We don't know. Let's start on Thursday night with Leeds United versus Norwich City at what will be a bouncing Elland Road. It felt like job done as Leeds United came away with a clean sheet after 3 pretty dismal away defensive displays previously. QPR and Borough, the last 2 in particular, 7 goals conceded in those, looked like being opened up at will. It was a very different type of display from Leeds, wasn't it? Like Southampton, dominated the ball, had over 60% of it, but bar 1 or 2 moments early on, weren't really carved open that much. Nonto will consider himself a bit unfortunate because he was fouled just outside the box, but he was definitely fouled and nothing was given early on in the game. And also Leeds had a goal chalked off, which Daniel Farke wasn't happy about. But overall, neither team really created much. And based on what we've seen this season, with Norwich having an excellent home record, the 4th best in the Championship, and Leeds having a very good away record and a very good defensive away record, I think they'll be pretty happy with that. Leeds obviously didn't carry the same goal threat they usually do on the road, and they set up a bit differently, didn't they? Archie Gray playing more advanced and Ruta the same, leaving out Pirro, Bamford not being available. It just meant it was a bit more of a cautious approach. Against the Norwich side that were risking players, they were bringing people back in. Janulis and Jonathan Rowe, great to see them back, but haven't started for a long time. And with Josh Sargent hobbling off towards the end too, feels like it might be going wrong at the wrong time for David Wagner, who's contended with a lot of key injuries this year while still doing a remarkable job, in my opinion. If Sargent doesn't make it, it could be both sides without their preferred striker. But for Leeds, there was also good return news as well. Dan James coming on late on, who has been a big goal threat in a Championship this year, whether starting or off the bench. And I think he could yet play a crucial role in this second leg, having played in a number of big games at various levels. But the second leg, we've got to talk about it as a very different game. Norwich away from home have the 6th worst record in a Championship this year. If it was based purely on away form, they would have finished 19th. 1 point a game +1, 24 points overall, 6 wins, 11 defeats, and 42 goals conceded. To put a little bit of perspective in that, only Rotherham conceded more goals on the road this season. Huddersfield and Birmingham were relegated. Sheffield Wednesday took some pummelings on the road early in the season. All conceded less away from home than Norwich City this year. It is a team that are awful at stopping the goals going in at the other end. They do score plenty on the road, 36 scored as well, but we have seen some horror shows from them against high-pressing teams that like to get in behind. If I remind you, for example, of that Plymouth game earlier in the year that they lost by 6-2, they were completely all over the place in that one. And Leeds are going to press with a similar intensity. They're not going to play like they did away from home. With the crowd behind them at Ellen Road, they will be aggressive. If Bamford isn't fit, Pirro will start and you will have Rutter in behind him. You'll have Gray a bit deeper in the pitch. You will have a proper attacking team from Leeds. They've got the 2nd best record in the Championship at home this year, just behind Ipswich Town by a point, better than Leicester, who won the title. The best defensive record at home with only 16 conceded, and they popped up with 45 goals as well. However, they have had 2 defeats, and they both came late in the season at Ellen Road. That 1-0 against Blackburn, which ended up ultimately costing them automatic promotion, and on the final day against Southampton, where, again, they struggled to create chances. And for Leeds, if you take out that Middlesbrough game, it's actually been the story at the end of the season. For all of their attacking threat, they have struggled for goals late on in the year. And maybe if Norwich can keep it quiet and keep it 0-0 for a while, there will just be that sense of frustration. I can only see this game going one of 2 ways, which is Leeds United to get frustrated and to maybe lose 1-0 to a counter-attack, or Leeds to be front-footed, aggressive, probably not be ruthless in taking their chances, but to do enough to get the win. I can't see it being one of those cagey draws like we saw in the first leg, and I can't see it going beyond 90 minutes if I'm being honest. We know Leeds will dominate the possession and the chances, but how does David Wagner set up? We know from his Huddersfield days, we know from times with Norwich, particularly at home this year, he likes being more aggressive than he was in the first leg and showed incredible restraint and discipline, but allows them to attack on the counter. And I actually think both teams are going to be susceptible to it. So despite what I went for in the first leg going horrendously wrong, I am going to go for goals in this second leg. Despite the little inkling that it might be a 1-0 Norwich win, I can't see them keeping a clean sheet on the road. Their home form has been remarkable this year, but on the road, they've still had their poorer moments, and they've still conceded goals at times as well. And similarly, to an extent, I know Leeds have had a couple of frustrating days at home, but I just think they're going to have too much of a goal threat. They're going to eventually find a way to break them down. If Leeds score first, I think they could win comfortably. If not, it could be a squeaky night. And if they don't get one early on, it could be a very uncomfortable one because the crowd will get edgy. You'll start to get a few of those groans when possession gets lost. It's a natural thing in the playoffs. It happens to everyone. We were quite fortunate last year with Luton in the semi-final in that we got that first goal so early to level the tie against Sunderland that the crowd was just with it then. And it became a bouncing atmosphere. If Leeds can do the same, I see them through to the final. I think they're going to do it. I think they'll do it just. I feel Norwich had to win that home game. If Norwich had got that 1-goal win I predicted at home, I think this could have been a tough night for Leeds. But as it is, I'm not going to go for them to take all their chances. I think there'll be some nervy moments. Somerville needs to be more involved. Nonto needs a bit more luck with officials. I felt he was actually the main threat for Leeds. I think Dan James could have a role to play off the bench. I'm going for Leeds to win, not comfortably, but by 2-1 to make the playoff final. In a game between two sides, I tipped for promotion this year. So as long as one of them wins the final, I won't look too bad. I'm going for 2-1 Leeds United in a nervy night at Ellen Road. As we move on to the second tie taking place on Friday night, which is between Russell Martin's Southampton and Carlos Corberán's West Brom. Now, I did mention in the first leg predictions that I thought both sides would be fairly happy with a draw. And actually, you look at the end of the game at both managers, and I think that's pretty accurate, isn't it? West Brom were very aggressive early on, and in the first 5 or 10 minutes had a barrage of set pieces and aggressive play. But Southampton grew into the game. They weathered that storm defensively, and they ended up having a lot of the possession, creating a couple of chances. I would argue it was a slightly more open game with better chances than Norwich Leeds, but it's still, you could easily see a draw being a fair result. We do have to give a shout out to both keepers. Alex Palmer we had briefly at Luton as an emergency loan a couple of years ago, just before we lost to Corberán's Huddersfield team in the playoffs. And Southampton under Russell Martin, I have to give credit because while they kept the possession and that still and almost got caught out once or twice, it was a far more pragmatic approach. It was a slight change in shape. And he's adapted during this season, which is something I didn't think he was capable of doing and was always my criticism of his Swansea and MK Don side. But when he's got to a side with the pressure of having to get results, he has adapted at a crucial moment. And I feel that 0-0 could be a brilliant result for them if they start like a house on fire in the second leg, because they've got to start how West Brom started the first one. But in addition to Alex Palmer, who I mentioned, I've got to shout out Alex McCarthy. I thought both of them made one outstanding save from deflected efforts. Palmer's save was brilliant. McCarthy's save was superb. While he had a couple of shaky moments with his feet, that save, combined with the way he dealt with the long throw of West Brom from Darnell Furlong, I felt was really crucial to Southampton defensively, because that is a weapon that has caused a threat to a lot of teams from West Brom, and Alex McCarthy completely nullified it. So in that leg, while the Bazunu injury doesn't help with your feet, and obviously not having Lumley available puts you to your third choice keeper, who Russell Martin clearly didn't fancy for the way he played, it actually, I think, helped them in that tie, because defensively from those set pieces, they were rock solid. And Alex McCarthy was a huge part of that. Flynn Downs being back in, rock solid job as well, kept possession well. It's all looking good for Southampton, aside from not having Che Adams, which maybe made them look a little more toothless up front. Great to see Ross Stewart back from a physical point of view, but he didn't look anywhere near fit, to be brutally honest. He's going to be a little while before you see the best of him, probably next season, but you wouldn't bet against him popping up with a big goal, would you? Very similar to what we said in the last tie, this is again home v away record. Southampton, second highest scorers in the division at home, 54 only bettered by Ipswich this season. 29 goals conceded is one of the worst records in the top half. Again, only Ipswich worse in the top 7 home records this year. West Brom, very much the opposite. Poor away record, 14th in the Championship based on that. But that's not due to defeats. They've actually lost the least of the top half on the road, just 9 defeats. A lot of draws. And I look at this, Southampton had a couple of frustrating home draws. I think back to that Rotherham game early in the season. Think back to when Millwall pipped them a few months ago under Neil Harris. I just look at this and think, could West Brom cause a bit of trouble? I think we know exactly what we're going to get from this tie, don't we? We're going to get, without the West Brom aggressive start, very much a possession-based game from Southampton. West Brom, I think, will almost be sitting back hoping for extra time and penalties, but maybe trying to nick one from a set piece on the break. I don't see them being as aggressive or intent in attacking as they were early in the first leg. And I think it will be them trying to weather the storm in the first half from the Saints, who at times, in difficult games recently, have blown their opposition away in the first half. Look at that Preston game as an example in recent weeks. We know both Leeds and Southampton have done the double over their opponents this year, and that does form part of my judgment as well. I felt Southampton looked a bit more of a threat in that first leg after that early storm in the first 10 minutes. And I just wonder if keeping the ball, if being aggressive is going to help them. But I've watched Carlos Corberán undo my Luton team in the playoffs with Huddersfield, and they got outplayed for 3 of the 4 quarters of the game. If Southampton score the first goal, and if they score in the first half, for me, they win the tie. Because I think when West Brom open up, Southampton will come good and score 2 or 3. I honestly believe that. But for as long as it's 0-0 or for as long as it's level, or particularly if West Brom get the first goal, it could be such a frustrating night in that home crowd. I think if there's going to be a surprise, I think it's more likely in this game. I just think it's going to be the less exciting game as a neutral, but the more tactically fascinating one. Will Russell Martin have any tricks? He's got a good record against Corberan, but a few draws in there. I can actually see this being pretty similar to what we saw in the first leg of Norwich Leeds, and to an extent the first leg of the tie of this one as well. I think it's going to be a frustrating night for Southampton. They're going to have to be patient. They're going to have to look for opportunities. And they might have to adapt their game plan and pull the trigger from distance, or even put more balls into the box, especially if Kyle Bartley doesn't make the second leg. He was struggling with his hamstring late on. I'm going to go for this one to go beyond the 90 minutes, I think. I think for the sake of the league, you want to see 3rd v 4th in the final, but none of the other playoffs have worked out that way. I'm going to go, again, for the Championship's favourite scoreline in 90 minutes, because I think that this is a game where West Brom could frustrate Southampton. I will caveat that by saying if Southampton get the first goal, I think they'll win it by a couple of goals to nil. They get one in the first half, again, I think it'll be a comfortable night for them, because West Brom, they've not got some of their biggest attacking threats at the minute. But I'm going to go for them to frustrate, to do the job in a Championship playoffs with a 1-1 draw after 90 minutes. I think extra time will be pretty boring, because it normally is at this level. And I'm going to go for it to go through the penalties. And I'm going to go for Southampton to win it on penalties. Despite the frustration of the night, there's a lot of attacking players missing for West Brom, and I know they've got some good technicians that will probably come off the bench, the likes of Wallace, Swift, etc. I think Southampton will get the job done in the end. I think this one's going to go to penalties. But for the first time in the 3 leagues, I think we will see a 3rd v 4th final. The top 2 teams progressing to Wembley. I'm going to go for Southampton to beat West Brom on penalties after a 1-1 draw in 90 minutes. So with that out of the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for in a second leg of these Championship playoff semi-finals. I've gone for Leeds United to create a safe passage through by 2-1 against Norwich on Thursday. And Southampton versus West Brom, much the same in terms of pattern. A cautious approach from the Baggies, very much an aggressive approach from Southampton, but will they get frustrated in possession? I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw after 90 minutes, and then after extra time, through the penalties, where Southampton, I think, will progress through to Wembley. So those are my predictions for the second leg of the 23-24 Championship playoff semi-finals. Do you agree or disagree with them? Let me know in the comments below. Will Leeds and Southampton make it to the final? Or will West Brom or Norwich or both cause a surprise? Give us your score predictions in the comments. And as I mentioned before, if you beat or match my overall score in the 2 games, you will get a shout out in a recap when we look ahead to the final at Wembley next week. Make sure you come and join us for that. But in the meantime, we will be back later this week with a look ahead to the League 2 and League 1 playoff finals this weekend. Those episodes will be out on Wednesday and Thursday. We've also got our final ever Premier League preview on Friday as Luton host Fulham. All but confirmed with relegation now. There's a few manager specials on the way as well, aren't there? We're waiting for news from Hull, from Sunderland and from Plymouth. I'm sure there'll be a couple more as well. For now though, if you did enjoy this one, please do put a thumbs up on it. Thank you very much for watching. It is greatly appreciated. If you want to stay up to date with all the other stuff coming this summer, a few big interviews as well from the footballing world, and subscribe and turn that notification bell on. As I mentioned, we will be watching both semi-final second legs on Twitch whilst playing Football Manager. You can find that link up in the eye above too. Thank you very much for watching, for being here as always. We'll see you back here next week to look ahead to the final and see if our predictions were right.